with a heavy inbound Dan Ryan ramp. Outbound 19 to the Tri-State 28 out to 355. It's also heavy on the inbound Dan Ryan ramp because of construction on the Ryan. Your sign pack from the Stevenson to Roosevelt, 20 minutes 90 at the downtown. That construction's taking out the right lane. Express lane's also suffering from 35th into the Stevenson. Bishop Ford inbound is tight from 103rd on in, 15 in from 80-94. And the northbound Tri-State, that's tight from 88 to the 290. That's traffic. I'm Jeremy Scott on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Sunny skies in our forecast, highs in the upper 70s today. It is 70 at O'Hare, 65 in Aurora, and your next news update is at 8. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by the Money Hour Radio Show, Saturday afternoons at 3 on AM 560, The Answer. Brought to you by Pearshell Financial Group.
When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity, this afternoon at 2 on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. James Altucher, if I'm pronouncing his name right.
Sounds good to me.
He owns a comedy club in New York. He writes at his blog that NYC, that would be New York City,
Thank you.
is dead forever. Here's why. Dead forever.
Forever. Never coming back. You wanted this, Democrats. You got it. Let's go.
Now it's completely dead. But NYC also always bounces back. No, not this time. But NYC is the center of the financial universe. Opportunities will flourish here again. Not this time. NYC has experienced worse. No, it hasn't. A Facebook group formed a few weeks ago that was for people who were planning on a move and wanted others to talk to and ask advice from. Within 2 or 3 days, that Facebook group became 10,000 members. Every day I see more and more posts. I've been in NYC forever, but I guess this time I have to say goodbye. Every single day I see these posts, I've been screenshotting them from my scrapbook. 3 of the most important reasons to move to New York City: business opportunities, culture, and food. And he goes through each of them to say why they'll never be the same, and thus New York will never be the same. Now, I will stipulate, as I'm sure he would, that all of his arguments are anecdotal in nature. This is not a data-rich argument. It's more of a feel.
Right.
But it's a feel by somebody who spent most of his life in New York and is now in South Florida, even though he still has his place in New York. Owns a comedy club there. Has done podcasting with a lot of celebrity comics and so forth that he talked about, and so has a perspective based on at least what he sees, at least in his experience in New York City. But as we talked about yesterday, there is data to also support that contention when you look at the rental vacancies year over year in places like New York, in places like San Francisco. You saw an outmigration that was happening from some of these big blue states with big blue cities prior to COVID-19, which is now only hastened in pace. So, is it the John Tamney from Real Clear Markets? No big deal. That's being a little bit too flippant about his position, but basically, big cities are going to be fine and they will bounce back. Or is it going to be the James Altucher? They're dead forever, and people are going to move to areas of less density. There'll be new clusters of talent, but they won't be in Silicon Valley or New York City. They'll be in places like Austin, Texas. Or is it somewhere in between? To help us answer that question, we're pleased to be joined by somebody who's spent a lot of time in New York and has been a guest on our show many times. He is Christopher Whalen, investment banker and chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, author of Ford Men: From Inspiration to Enterprise, as well as Inflated: How Money and Debt Built the American Dream. He's also the editor of the Institutional Risk Analyst. Christopher Whalen, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Happy day from New York. It's a beautiful day in New York.
Yes, I'm sure.
Stunningly gorgeous here, too, in Chicago.
You got a lot of space to walk around. You're not bumping into each other anymore. What about that? Where's your handle on this, looking at both the data and probably hearing a lot of anecdotes as well? As the James L. Trusher, the comedy club owner, or our friend John Tamney from Real Clear Markets? Who's closer to the mark, do you think?
I think James is. Like him, I'm an old New Yorker. My dad's family's been here for 250 years and came from Ireland. And they, built this city. So what you have is an old city with some new stuff, but primarily a very old city in terms of the housing stock and even commercial buildings. And people were kind of looking for a reason to leave, if you think of it from a corporate perspective. It costs a lot of money per seat in New York City, right? It costs a lot less to put them in Chattanooga or in Charlotte or in Dallas. I work in the mortgage industry a lot. Half the industry is migrating to Texas now because their people can live well, less regulation, and the cost is probably 2/3 or less than California.
Well, and
California has great people. Don't get me wrong, but still, the people can leave.
Well, and to your point too, just because it's relevant in Chicago as well with our financial services sector.
Sure.
We talk about Austin being a new tech hub. Charlotte is quickly the #1 banking center in America.
Yes, and that was a result of some mergers, and also it was a big virgin city that hadn't had a lot of anchor tenants in terms of corporations and big employers, and they have the universities. So it's perfect. It's a perfect place to put financial services. And again, lots of cheap real estate for your people to get really nice homes. My cousin lives there. He's been there for many years. He works for Wells, interestingly.
But with respect to a New York bounce back, same thing would be argued with Chicago. These cities are not Detroit, where they're basically overexposed in terms of in one sector. They've got some heterogeneity in terms of commercial enterprise, and so why can't they bounce back even if they lose some financial concerns or some banking concerns?
Well, look, the Dutch built New York for commerce. It's a place to pack lots of people and let them interact. That's why they did it this way. So it's not a Paris that's beautiful. It's an efficient city. But if the people aren't here, or if they don't physically have to be here anymore in order to interact, which I think is more and more the case, then all of a sudden the reason for New York existing the way it was, and also Detroit, remember, these are all accidents of history. Mm-hmm. And I think, look at the mortgage business. In March, everybody in the industry had to add 30% to headcount while they were sending everyone home. Okay? So they sent everyone home. They gave everyone a printer and a scanner and anything else they needed, by the way. And then they hired 30% more people, many of whom have never met each other. But they had to add the headcount. And now they're going to do that again between now and the end of the year. They're going to grow another 30%. 30%. So what it tells you is that the tech was there to let us do this. And the old way of doing business in offices, centralization, personalization, all of that, right, is not necessary. It's nice to have, but it's not necessary to carry on.
But now
I think we're going to have to figure out what that means, by the way. I don't know.
The flip side of that is Amazon is making a bet on office space work. The announcement today, 3,500 employees in 6 major cities, including 2,000 in New York, much to the chagrin of AOC, I'm sure.
Well, look, AOC is going to have to grow up one day. This infantile Marxist nonsense that the Democrats are spouting right now is not going to work, and it will not work here. And think about the fact, I wrote this in American Conservative, that Andrew Cuomo is the adult in the room in New York. The rest of the political class are basically immature, and they don't understand finance or economics, which is something they have in common with many people in Washington, of course. So you have this crowd that is trying to pander to consumers on the one hand, making decisions about our future, taxes, everything else that are scary. And it will finish off what Donald Trump started with, changing the state and local taxes and the ability to deduct real estate. This is the final blow to the blue states.
Well, tell us about that.
New York's a magnet for money. That's why it was here. Sales taxes, right? And when you look at the New York numbers, the rest of the state is like a third, and New York City is now gone.
Well,
they're not generating anything like the sales taxes they were.
Speaking of New York City, tell us about the squabble between Cuomo and Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Oh, well, that's part of this drama is de Blasio wants to basically do nothing in terms of headcount reductions. And he believes someone is going to come to his rescue. I guess Joe Biden. But the problem is we have all these other cities, Chicago, Los Angeles, all the rest of them. They're all in the same boat. They've taken a big hit to tax revenues, and they're going to see a hit to property taxes because the value of buildings is going to fall, and the owners will come in and seek lower assessments. This will be trench warfare for years, by the way. But I'm just saying, over time, the tax base for the city will fall. So de Blasio wants to go out and spend money to paper over this year's deficit, but we don't have a discussion about next year yet. And there's been no real headcount reduction, no reduction in, say, the number of subway cars are running empty. They're just running the city like it's normal. And the reason they get away with this is because first quarter, second quarter of this year, if you think of the calendar quarters, we're okay. There was a lot of money in the pipeline, but they're looking at an $8-10 billion shortfall this year. And that's a big number for them.
And
the total shortfall in New York's about 50. So think of New York City as 10 of it, and then the state is the rest because they collect sales taxes. 8% sales tax. That's what drives this.
We're familiar with those kind of numbers in Illinois.
And empty subway cars.
But here's the thing. Just on I want to get to the reaction to that in a second, but I wanted to close the loop on office space. Because it seems to me there's this belief that everybody's going to be working remotely or a significant percentage of the workforce. And then there are other stories, including last week in the Journal, where you have HR people talking about, actually, we do want to bring people back in an office setting because the collaboration is important, because the mentorship of senior people with younger people is important. And we're finding that there was an initial rush of productivity, or at least maintaining productivity levels, because people were afraid for their jobs. That has subsided, and now they're not actually being as productive as they were when they were in an office setting.
Well, you have to maintain a certain office routine. Like I work at home with my wife. My wife's a private banker. And I'm an investment banker, totally different world. But we get up, we get dressed, we have breakfast, and we get on with it. And, we work all day just like we were in the office. We interact with people by phone all day, right? So there's a certain part of the population that can do that. There's another part, though, that really needs to come into the office. There are just things that they have to do face-to-face, and it's more efficient to do it that way. And there's other types of communication that occur that are not necessarily logged or backed up onto the server that are also very important, if you know what I mean. So, that's offices are important.
Do you have any intention of
I work with
going
traders.
back to the office?
No, but I'm a banker. I don't have to be there every day. But it is important for me to be able to sit down with our repo trader for 10 minutes and say, okay, what's going on?
Right.
No,
I get
because
that.
it's that kind of interaction that's crucial. It depends. It really depends. But I think, look, if they can keep them out of New York for a while and avoid the perceived liability of putting a person in a building, we're going to have to waiver everybody who goes into a building in New York every time they enter. You're going to have them sign a piece of paper, okay? You're going to test their temperature. You're going to screen them in some cases. Your employer is going to have to screen them too.
And they're going to get COVID anyway because the temperature has nothing to do with it. It's all security theater. But
I know. But UV sanitation and the air conditioning, the whole bit.
That's
right?
going to make everything better.
California State Assemblyman has introduced a wealth tax, 0.4% on households with $30 million or more in wealth. And also, this is unconstitutional, but it would have to be litigated, and it very well may. It would claw out 10 years. So you leave California with your money, you still have a scale down 90, 80, 70, 60% of that wealth tax for 10 years after you left. So you can check out a Hotel California, but your wallet stays, essentially. And it's the same thing moving in, 10-year phase in of if you're bringing wealth to the table, 10-year phase in. So why would anybody move there? And why would anybody not leave there post-haste who's got any money or aspirations of building wealth? And then, of course,
this is being,
and of course, this is going to just one point, and then it's going to scale down to middle income, just like its graduated state income tax did, where people making more than 45 grand pay 8% in state income tax in California. Illinois is doing the same thing with a graduated state income tax on the ballot in November. I presume you're going to have the same thing in New York. So isn't that those policies? That's going to be the response from these big government left politicians, and that's only going to hasten the demise of these big cities.
I totally agree with you. And I think, if New York is stupid enough to go down that path, and California too, then they get what they deserve, because there's already an out-migration of people, particularly if you think of it, the costlier people in California to other states, both personally and professionally. In some cases, they'll keep a sales presence in California, but everyone else will leave because it's so expensive. So if they want to play this game, that's fine, but I think it kills them. Ultimately, the Democrats, as you said, right, they've got to realize that the middle of the population are the ones who pay the freight. That's where you get revenue. Mm-hmm. You don't get revenue from rich people. There's not enough rich people. If you could take half of their money, it would still be trivial. So when you see in New York that they're not cutting back on headcount, what are they saying? Is that they know politically that if they did layoffs in September, the Democrats would do very poorly. And all of them know this. We're playing a little game here now between now and the election. But I got to tell you, whoever wins and is sitting in the White House is going to be facing a mess. It's going to be like, November of 1932 in historical terms. And I think it's unfortunate. But, if Joe thinks he can come in and raise $3 trillion in taxes and then spend it all, he's out of his mind. We're already at the point where Treasury is having problems issuing debt. So if we don't all sober up pretty soon, both parties now, right, and realize that we do have to start thinking about our role in the world and how people perceive us, we're done. The Dems think they can float all the states on the federal government. That's the game plan. That's hundreds of billions of dollars, by the way, for 1 year. That's all you get.
There's no question that's the case, and so the outmigration continues, and the redistribution of population among the 50 states. And
they already have this, by the way. New York, if you're a big enough fish, and if you maintain a presence in the city with personal tchotchkes and all, your clothes and that sort of stuff, they will still come after you as a resident.
Right.
Even if you have a Florida driver's license and you're registered to vote in Florida, you have to litigate with them.
Yeah.
If you're big enough. So de facto, we have that in New York. If they pass it broadly, though, I got to say, I think that's going to – our property prices are falling. You were talking about commercial space. They don't show the space, but the space is there. The boys just take it off the market. They don't let anybody see it. So, New York, we have a huge amount of space, and I'm not sure how it's ever going to be used, especially older buildings, not the new nice stuff, right? Think about the older stock in New York, which can be 50, 60, 70 years old. This stuff needs to go, but you got to have money for that, and they're going to chase all the money out. So, surprise, surprise. I think you'll see buildings being abandoned in New York again, the way we had in the 70s. It'll just be like, Shaft. We can make another sequel to the movie. It'll be great. Now, listen, when I moved back to the city in the 80s, there was no one here. There were no policemen here. I worked at the Fed in New York downtown. Manhattan was empty. We could race around the island at night in our hot rods.
Well, there you go.
Good fun.
Well, everything.
You can do it
you can
again.
park anywhere you want.
Full circle.
The city,
Yeah, you should screen the Warriors over the weekend and get ready for fun times all the way to Coney Island.
That's all gone now. Listen, downtown gentrified, and this was supposed to be the walkable city. Think about how that's changed. The rap in real estate of 2 years ago saying, everybody's going to live in the city, they're going to walk. We're going to walk on the High Line, right? That whole project on the west side of New York, Hudson Yards, is hurting. And I think you're going to see a lot of space like that hat in hand for years.
We're going to have to leave it there. Christopher Whalen, investment banker, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, author of
Have a wonderful day.
Forward Men from Inspiration Enterprise. Thanks for joining us, Christopher. Appreciate it.
Well, be well. Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
We're all aware of national dealers that sell gold and silver. But national dealers? It sounds so impersonal and far away. Guess what? Fox Valley Coins in Naperville is a national dealer, and they're right here in our backyard. With Fox Valley Coins close by, you won't have to relinquish your personal information and money through the mail and hope that you receive what you ordered in the next